Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending the 2023 California Early Math Symposium. And thank you especially for attending our session, Great Graphs and Smart Charts. We look forward to this little bit of time that we have together today. We have material that covers pre-K to grade 3, and it's all about data and how it's represented.
It's great to see all of you. Welcome here. My name is Jonathan Duick. I work here in Fresno for the Office of the County Superintendent of Schools. I'm a content coordinator as a part of the California Early Math Initiative. I get to work with a lot of schools, districts, teachers, administrators about increasing student engagement, coaching teachers, and talking about how to get families involved in mathematics. And I also do work outside the county to support whoever is looking to build their math program.
My name is Stuart J. Murphy. I'm a children's book author and visual learning strategist. I live in Boston, Massachusetts, and I have a number of books. Some of you may know my Math Start series, which has a total of 63 books that cover mathematical topics in the context of stories for young children. I also have a series called I See, I Learn, which is 16 books that deal with social and emotional health and safety and cognitive skills for pre-K through kindergarten. The book I'm going to be talking about quite a bit today is called Show and Tell, Great Graphs and Smart Charts. And of course, it's all about data. And then finally, I'm on the authorship teams of a number of major educational programs for Savvas learning. One is called Envision Mathematics, Envision Math, and the other is called 3 Cheers for Pre-K. Most importantly, though, I'm an advocate for using visual learning strategies to help our children become more successful students. Our presentation today is going to cover quite a bit of stuff, so we have a lot to do together. We're going to talk about data, what it is, how to collect it, and why it's important. And with the collection process, of course, we're going to talk about once you collect it, how you organize it, and how and represent it, how to make data meaningful. We're going to talk about different types of charts and graphs that are appropriate for young children, and how to turn those into infographics that make that information truly visually dynamic. And then finally, we've got some real treats for you. John, do you want to talk about that?
So I would love to, because we were able to talk about how the work that Stuart has done and his interest in all of this can be translated into the classroom and what it might look like. So we'll start with Stuart talking about all of his wonderful ideas, and then I'll share how I implemented those into some classroom situations.
Yeah, this is going to be great. I think it's great to see how parents and teachers and children use this kind of information. It kind of goes full circle from when you write something about it and then people actually use it and do things with it. My new book is called Show and Tell, Great Graphs and Smart Charts, and it's an introduction to infographics for young children. This is the cover of the book, and you can tell by the artwork that it's going to be lively and fun and very colorful. The illustrator's name is Teresa Belon. She comes from Madrid, Spain, and I've been so happy to work with her on this very new publication. I've tried to cover the 4 basic graphs: bar graphs, pie charts or circle graphs, line graphs, and pictographs. Those are the ones that our children are going to be seeing the most frequently. And I think a foundational knowledge of how they work and what they're about is really helpful to our young children. I'm going to start out with bar graphs, and I kind of created a situation for a data collection where these 2 kids would kind of pick their favorite meals. They list their favorite 5 or 6 meals, and then they go around and take a poll and find out which are the most popular. Now, everybody could vote only once. You can't vote double. You have to pick one. And they talked to 85 different people. They use tally marks to show the numbers of people. And I really like that because you can see you can count by 5s, 5, 10, 5, 10, 15, 20, 21. And the information is very visible and the data is organized. So you see that 10 people selected mac and cheese, pizza, 21, chicken and rice, 15, salad bar, 8 people selected that, burritos, 18, and finally hamburger and fries, 13 different people. So there's a really nice table organizing that information.
It's so easy to see, Stuart. I work with teachers and students all the way up through upper elementary, 5th grade, 6th grade. And every now and then I come across a classroom or students who've never done tally marks, where we'll do some kind of graphing, charting, data collection, and they're just drawing line after line after line after line, and they never put that 5th line through. So it's really nice to impress upon people, look how easy this can be, and students grasp it at a very young age.
Thank you. Yes, I think they work great. Tally marks work great. And then here, what we did was we tried to make that represent that information in a graph. And so we're talking about a bar graph here. And so we made a great big L on our piece of paper. And that bottom part of the L, the horizontal one, is called the x-axis, and the vertical one is called the y-axis. The top part of the L shape. And what we did was we kind of labeled all of those meals that we just already described at the bottom with a little space between them so you could easily see the bars. And then we knew that we had to be over 20. And so up the side, we went from 0 to 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, so that we could represent the information correctly. You can see how those bars laid out very, very easily. The first one going right up to 10, the second one going above 20 because it's 21, etc. And so now, after getting that bar graph down and getting that visual representation ready, what I wanted to do was inspire the kids to say, okay, what's the point we're trying to make here? How can we have fun with this? How can we make this more exciting? And how can we show it to other people? So we give it a great title, Best Meals Ever. We get that information down and filled it up with pictures of the actual things, so that the actual foods that we're talking about, and just kind of made it more lively and fun so that people could readily see, hey, pizza's the favorite, salad bar out of these 6 was the least favorite, and everything in between.
I love this. And one thing that I didn't notice the first time, but did notice after looking at it for a second, maybe even a third time, is that the graphics that are on here aren't perfectly contained within those bars. When you look at some of those chicken legs, those bones stick a little bit outside of the bar. Some of that pizza crust isn't perfectly contained into there. And when we look at student work, or we're asking students to start doing this, we shouldn't expect perfection. We should expect experimenting and trying, but also the creativity isn't always exactly what they're going for the first time. And you don't notice it initially, but as you dig deeper into it, looking at what students are trying to do, what it might look like, takes on different forms, and to be aware that it's okay as we move forward, because it's about how we can visually show this and become really excited about the data.
Anything to make it fun for kids and to help get the point across. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about pictographs. And pictographs are represented by pictures or icons of the topics that we're talking about. So the Science Club wanted to know which were the most popular household pets in the classroom. And in the United States, the most popular household pet is fish, oddly enough, because fish, you don't usually think of it, but fish, you don't usually have one. You usually have many fish. Sometimes you have more than one dog, more than one cat. Certainly you could have a couple birds or hamsters, but never 6 or 8 or 12. Usually it's like 2 or 3 or 1. And so that's why fish always end up on top. But I left it in there anyway so that you could see the comparisons. And this is the data. So we went around the classroom and collected the data and found out that 10 people had birds, 45 people cats, 40 dogs, 60 fish, and 25 hamsters. And so these are the approximate quantities of those. You can see that we represented them with very simple symbols here so that you could see the difference between, say, the bird and the cat and the dog, the fish and the hamster. But then I ran into a problem. We ran into a problem because we have each icon represents 10 because the numbers are so high. And sometimes we had 5, so we had to cut those symbols in half so that there would be a half of a 10 for a 5. So there are 10 birds you can see, and then 10, 20, 30, 40, 5 with the half. Cats, the dogs are 10, 20, 30, 40. The fish are 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. And hamsters are 10, 25. Now again, we want to add a nifty title, jazz it up, make it more fun to show and tell. And here they are, pets galore. And here is our data represented in a colorful and fun way so that you can see which are the most popular pets in our school.
I think it's a nice point, Stuart, that you make. It's not just about how you went from having the silhouette of the animals, but then moving to the picture of the animals, but you made a jazzy title, right? Not just most common pets in our school. I tend to go with things like pets, pets, pets. But letting the students come up with those ideas is such a beautiful way to engage and interact even more.
So now we've done two of our different types of charts, and we're going to move on to one that is very, very popular. It's called a circle graph or a pie chart. And in this particular case, it's kind of interesting because what happened is we're talking about the number of kids. There are 100 kids in the summer program. And there are 4 different sports, and each of the students has to select one sport because they're going to be doing that for the next week, and then they can select another sport for the following week or something like that. And so they have their choice. They can pick any of these 4, and you can see what happened. 40 of them, 40 out of the 100 selected soccer. And so it's kind of interesting because I decided to introduce fractions here. Of course, I've got 40 over 100 and percents, because 40 over 100 is 40 out of 100, or 40%. And I thought it was a nice way to kind of introduce that idea in a very simple fashion so that when we finally see the pie chart, kids can kind of get it. Before we go there, though, you can see that at the bottom with the pie chart, the whole is the pie, and that's 100%, or 100 over 100. And so you can see that we have to have the full pie chart filled so that it becomes 100%. So 40 selected soccer, 30 selected track, 20% selected basketball, and 10% selected swimming. Let's see what that looks like in a pie. And there it is. Very easy to see that soccer is the most popular, that in this visualization that swimming is the least popular of those 4 sports. And you can see the wedge of the pie that they take up, and that it totals the whole 100%. Now, again, we've got to jazz it up and make it look exciting and interesting. So here they are, the different sports and some indications of the kind of sports activities that will be going on, a little bit of jazzing up of the percentages and the titles, and it's all about sports.
This is beautiful. And you mentioned the idea of introducing percent. And even the words you used were so comfortable and easy, percent, per 100, and going back and forth. That makes percent not as intimidating for some students. When a teacher says, today we're talking about percent, and everyone gets panicked because it's a percent day. But just to say, and that's how you do percent. That's what it looks like, per 100. Super great. And again, a great way to introduce something that shouldn't be intimidating or scary.
Now, finally, I wanted to move on to line graphs, because line graphs are very useful. Line graphs are the most useful type of graph for things that constantly change over time. For example, weather is a good example. It gets hot, it gets cold, it goes up, it goes down, and or maybe how much money you've got in your piggy bank. You've taken some out, you put some in, you've added some, your grandma gives you some more, and so the figures go up and down and up and down, and they're constantly changing. And then you pick various points at which to record that information. So this is a topic or a situation, a setup that most of you would probably relate to. You've got 2 kids in the back of the car. They're going to visit their cousins. It's going to be kind of most of a full day trip, and they're bored, and they decide, okay, let's keep track of how far we've gone each hour. And so you can see from their data collection here, they looked at the odometer at the end of an hour at 9 o'clock. They've been on the road for an hour, and they've gone 40 miles. So they averaged 40 miles an hour. It was going up and down, of course, during that period of time, but 40 miles an hour, they're probably on local streets, not going very fast. And then for the next hour, they must have gotten on the highway, because suddenly they were going 60 miles an hour, an average of 60 miles an hour during that hour. And so they ended up going 100 miles at the end of that. Back down to 40, must have been a traffic jam or something like that, slow traffic, big crowds, back up to 60. Then there's a little time that, let's get to that on the next display, shall we? Okay, so here we are with that information charted. Again, along the x-axis, remember that word? X-axis, the one that goes across the bottom. We've listed the time intervals. And on the y-axis, that one that goes up, we started with 0 and went, in this case, by intervals of 10. So 0 to 10, 20, 30, 40. No, we went from 0. we were going a lot further than that. You can see that. And so we went we went up to 100, 110, and went all the way up to the up over 400 miles at the very top of the chart. Now,
so this is beautiful. And Stuart, I love that in the middle of this, there's a flat line that you can reference. So speak to that, and then on this beautiful part here.
Yeah, kids bring that up when I talk about this, and I like to provoke that question, because, okay, you can kind of see that they're moving forward and going up and up and up and up, and then all of a sudden they're not going up. And so what's going on there? But it's moving in one direction, not moving in the other. And so it's moving in time. It's an hour that moved in time, but it's a period that did not move in miles. And so obviously they were stopped. It was lunchtime. And so here they are on the road again with all sorts of little visualizations around the sides of their adventure for that day until they got to their cousin's house finally at 350 miles out.
I love it. And you're keeping it real with this, right? You do stop for lunch. You do go different speeds. It's not just on the freeway, 60 miles an hour. We've all experienced that as adults when we're driving, but letting kids know that that is not always like this beautiful, clean, perfect thing, that things change over time. So really nice.
Yeah, and so that's what I wanted to do is I wanted to give you a brief introduction in this presentation to the 4 basic different types of charts and graphs that kids are most likely to experience and that they're most likely to be able to build. And I think this foundational information will be very, very helpful to them and for them as they begin to build their own infographics in the classroom.
I agree. Thank you, Stuart, for what you've done here, because it's such a beautiful, again, way to show kids what this can look like, show teachers what it can look like, and move forward. And it was a great impetus for me. So I was able to take what this book showed and all the different ideas here and think, okay, let's practice this, do this with some classrooms, with some students, and then be able to share out here for everybody to see what it looked like for me. And maybe you can make it even better based off of that. So I worked with students that were in preschools, early kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. So this first group that I worked with were in California, we have transitional kindergarten. Some other states or areas might call it like pre-kindergarten. But this was basically a group of students that were 4, 5, and 6 years old, and we were doing pictographs. So this was like a independent study co-op that I was able to be a part of. So I went into here thinking we're going to talk about the Very Hungry Caterpillar as our base. So we had a book that I could read to them and talk about, and then we could talk about the different foods that the Very Hungry Caterpillar ate. And here you can see me sitting with these students on the ground, and they got to choose of these 6 fruits which one was their favorite. Stuart referenced in one of his examples, like every student would pick one. Though because I only had 8 students, I decided to let them choose twice. So we went around the circle once and the other direction around the circle for them to pick their favorite fruits and choose what they are. And you can see those in the picture right there. All right. So as we're going through this, they're choosing it. They're talking about what their favorite one is, picking their top 2 as we went around and did this. And then I pulled out a 2-column chart and I said, how can we display this? And I sat back and pointed out that there were 2 columns and that they would decide how they could put their data on there. Hopefully you're already noticing a few things. Hopefully you're also wondering a few things as we went through here, because I wanted to let them experience and think about what that could be. Their considerations were really important. They kept putting some things down there, and me just saying, how can we organize this? How can we make this something that we can view and look at and start to understand? So then we went from this picture to this picture as they're leaning in, they're discussing things, they're moving initially only their 2 fruits around to eventually starting to move some other friends' fruits around, what that would look like. Now, as we're still on this 2-column graph, what do you notice and what do you wonder? I'll point out a couple of things. First of all, the perspective that's going on here. Because we were in a circle, I hadn't said this is the bottom or this is the top and how that's going to work. You might see some things that would hint at the bottom of the graph or the side of the graph, but this was not clear to all the students since we had the fruits, some starting at my feet, some starting opposite from me, going other directions. And you might also notice that 4 watermelon took up the same space as 3 strawberries. And all that's going to get addressed as we move forward with this. So eventually, as they're doing this, they're putting more things down. And what am I doing? Look at what my hands are right here. So my right hand is not touching it. I'm trying to hold that back from pointing at things, letting them be the students, letting them be the learners, and considering what that looks like. And look at my left hand, literally over my mouth, trying to stop myself from saying anything, because I'm a teacher. I teach. That's what I do. And sometimes I need to be a little bit less of a teacher and more of a facilitator for these students as they move forward. And listening to these 4, 5, and 6-year-olds talk, a little bit of arguing, nothing too intense about what that looks like. So it was great to watch this.
I absolutely love this. I love the idea that you're not guiding them; you're letting them guide themselves, talk amongst themselves, have their own ideas, and explore. And that great word, wonder what's going on.
Yeah. And we don't always have that opportunity. And I was like, I need to take advantage of having only 8 kiddos right here and do this, and what I can leave for that conversation. So then I thought, all right, what if I gave them 3 columns? Would that help? And you can kind of see that I just overlaid it on top of there. So their fruit was underneath there, but this gave them a moment to pause and consider what that would look like. And our conversation then moved that there were 6 types of fruit and 3 columns. What can we do? Well, Mr. Dewick can draw some lines on there, and now we have 6 columns. And we still had some confusion, and so we still had some discussion about that, what that was going to look like. And all of a sudden, I've got 3 plums in the same column as a pear, and me trying to point out, well, what do you think about this? How else could we organize this? What else might it look like? And we moved to this model right here, and more discussion, more prompting. That finally moved to this picture right here. And this is what it looked like at the end. And now, again, notice and wonder, what's occurring right here? What would you do next? What would you think about prompting your students with? I'll point out simply that some of these fruits that I'd cut out need to overlap each other to make it fair as we went across. I didn't want 5 slices of watermelon to equal 4 strawberries. I needed them to be commiserate with each other right there as they went across. We were able to show favorites, least favorite, but still recognized what was showing there. Sometimes when we ask students to pick their favorites, our graphs have equalities, discrepancies, but this was a really nice turnout for everything that was right there. So it was great to watch this.
So exciting that you can just immediately see, they could immediately see that the information is clear, which was the most popular, which was the least popular, what's in between. And it's really exciting, the clarity of the display.
Yeah, more than, less than, most, least, all that stuff was just super cool. Even which ones were the same, since the pear and you can barely see the apple showing were the same. I mentioned at the beginning, this was part of a parent co-op. And so I interviewed some of the parents afterwards to just get their thoughts, because these are people who teach math to their child independently, but came together for this experience. So here's what some parents thought. All right, can you tell me what you thought about the lesson and what math you saw the children doing?
What I loved about the lesson was that they were doing math, but I don't necessarily even know that they knew that they were doing math, because it was hands-on. They were getting to make decisions. They were getting to move manipulative.
One more try.
It was a lesson on graphing, and they were looking at different combinations of how to lay objects out on a graph, how to read.
All right. Well, my apologies for that. But she liked the idea that the students maybe didn't recognize that they were doing math, and they were able to dig in there and talk about it. And she liked that there was graphing involved in the midst of all of that. But I have one more video I'll show you. This is 2 parents talking together, and hopefully this will play better. Thanks for being a part of that. Can you tell me what you thought of the lesson and what math you saw happening?
I like seeing the kids engage in blocking numbers together. They heard some of them counting in 2s, blocking numbers together, just really opening up their mind in different methods of counting.
And I like seeing them do the graphing, all the different ways to graph, and not just only one certain way. Was nice that they got to kind of see that there's other options out there.
All right. So again, a little choppy with there. And that one mom referenced the idea of how to, the different ways of graphing. So I'll point out some of that right now, what that looks like. All right. And I need to get the slides back up there because you want to see that and not me. All right. One moment. Okay. All right. So then I thought, all right, I've got these students. Let's move forward. talking about what we're doing right here. And I said, now that we had this fruit that we were organizing, let's do it with a standard sized item. So I had Post-it notes for them. So we took these Post-it notes and I just said, choose your one favorite item there. So you'll notice on this 4-column chart or 4-row chart, depending on your orientation, I labeled them and I said, I want you to stick your Post-it note in your favorite spot right there. So they each picked their favorite and stuck it on there. And then we were able to talk about what that looked like. Now notice the picture on the left, that's where the students place their Post-it note. This is great. Everyone gets to be a part of it. They all get to be hands-on, placing it there. And then I'm able to say, I'm not going to remove any of these, but how can we organize this so we can more readily recognize the height to show all of this? So they were able to count, to subitize, to see which one had the most or the least. And then we're able to show this with a bar graph of what it looks like to set these up so that they're more easily noticed right there. So that was our second graph that I made with all of them.
So John,
then,
one of the things
yeah.
I wanted to comment on about this, we haven't talked about yet, one of the powerful things I think about this is that it's their data. It's about them. It's not something that somebody gave to them. It's not some information they had no part of. It's not something that they wonder where it came from and what it means. It's their story. It's about them. It's a visualization of their story, their data. And I really think that's a very powerful idea. It engages them and makes them feel a part of it.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great point, right? That isn't just contrived, right? That they're pulling it out. Okay, so now I took a deep breath because I was going to jump into making circle graphs, and I've always kind of avoided circle graphs with students. So I had my plastic vehicles, and I thought we'll start with a bar graph, and we did the same thing. Everybody gets to pick 2 of your favorite ones, and I used that same 4-column chart. I placed one of each thing across the bottom, and they pulled out which they thought were their favorites. So again, with my suggestion on that, talking about what that would look like, we're able to place them on there. But then I had the same idea of, I want to make sure that there's equality across this board and what that might look like. So then I said, let's talk about the idea of the visual piece. This wasn't, like I said, a simple thing for 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. They're starting to get closer and closer to me, right? Like this is our 3rd one. And if you've ever worked with young children, you know that we had to kind of pause. Everyone step back a little bit, scoot back a little bit. I had parents like tapping their children on their shoulders, like move back, but still having a wonderful time. And that's when I busted out the idea of let's use something that's more easily seen here. So we pulled our vehicles back off. I placed this chart down, and then we were able to get our hands back in there to look at it. And I circled in red just an overlay on the photo that those are the ones I placed down so they would have a base of doing that. And I would change this chart in the future to have a darker line around that. So that was one big learning in terms of visually showing all of that, to be able to see where they went. And again, look at what's going on here. Whose hands are moving these around? This isn't about the teacher doing it. The kids should be doing this. And I had the benefit of only 8 students, but we all have the benefit of having some kind of stations that students can move from. So this doesn't have to be your full classroom. This can be a portion of your classroom working on this. So all that conversation, and then this is our final product of what we came through. So I had someone taking pictures from above. So that orientation alone sometimes got a little off. And if you're in education, you tend to just roll with that and be okay with it. And we can see what that final piece looked like. So like I said, now it's time to like make the big, like take a breath and say it's time to make a circle graph. And I was not ready to do this with 8 students at once. So we broke them into 2 groups of 4 to do our circle graphs, because like I said, I'm taking pictures. I'm nervous because I want this to look good for you. So I reduced my group size.
Well, I think using the manipulatives is a great idea. I think that not only is it hands-on for the kids and makes them move something physical versus just writing about it, but it also gives it a reality that I think is fun.
Yeah, it was super fun. So I printed this circle. I just did a online search for a circle, printed it out, and it worked just fine to fit them inside the circle. Now I was ready to have them on the circle or outside of the circle. It didn't matter for this, but mine went inside the circle. We're talking with my 4 students here, and I repeated this with the second group. So they both had similar conversations, if not almost identical. So we placed them on there. The next step was talking about how do we visually divide some of this. So we had those lines drawn on there to separate the trucks from the cars, from the planes, from the boats. And then I made that next jump into writing not fractions, but like 6 out of 20, 5 out of 20, 3 out of 20. Full confession, if some of you were saying, wait a minute, John, you said 8 students, each student picked 2, that was 16. Why are there 20? Because when I pulled out 4, one of each vehicle to be like at the baseline to know where to stack them off of, when we moved from the bar graph to the circle graph, I just picked them all up. And all of a sudden we're in the midst of making a circle graph. And I was like, wait a minute, why are there 20 here? And I realized that I added 4 in kind of randomly. Luckily, they're 4, 5, and 6 and didn't even notice, but they got the gist of the math. So it was okay as we did all of this. But one more learning experience as we did this, right? So you're getting full John in the midst of this. So it was great. What I did not do, because the time was running late and I was a bit overcome with everything, we didn't move on to fractions or percentages, but had a great conversation of 6 out of 20, 3 out of 20, and what that means. And then I swapped groups and repeated this with the other 4 students doing that. So,
but the idea is, I think yes, you could have taken a swan dive into fraction work here, but you're almost there, and I think it's kind of nice of them to think of 5 out of 20 before they maybe move on to 5 over 20 and then try and simplify that, et cetera, et cetera. I think this might be a nice, easy expression of that.
Yeah. And you can see that like the vehicles get bumped a little bit, they get moved around, and it's okay because we're just like, what's the conversation? That's the big piece there, talking about the math. So that was my experience with that 4, 5, and 6-year-olds with a small group. So I work across the hallway from a preschool, and we did a family math night not too long ago, and we pulled a lot of information off of Count, Play, Explore, which takes children's literature books and draws the math out of it. It also shows ways that you can engage in mathematics with your children in your home, as a family, as a community. But this night, we talked about some different math books and how we could pull the math out, like I said. One of them had some specific graphing to do, and this was called taste test, where the students would come in and they would taste test items and then make a tally chart. So this is the setup that we had. This is one of 6 stations. This one involves some specific graphing that I wanted to show pictures of. So this had information for the parents. They could come in, look at it. We also had the book available. So the parent and child could come in, they could read Beep Bim Bop as a family, and then after they read Beep Bim Bop, they could follow the instructions that are on the table, but also on a chart right there, to make some dips and sample each of the 5 items that we have there, and then do that taste test. So here's a picture of what that table looked like. We had the food already chopped and ready to go, and then they were able to use tongs to make their plate and do a taste test. So then they took it originally was going to be about their favorite dip of the 2 dips, but we ended up making this about the vegetable or fruit itself. So they were able to taste it, talk about it as a family, and then that child can make a tally mark of which one was their favorite. There was a teacher here to help out with it. I was moving around to different stations that night, but this one specifically I was able to pop in for a little bit longer and look at. And eventually they're able to put the marks on there. So these are the marks of a preschooler, right? We're not expecting, I almost said I'm not expecting beauty, but it is beautiful. But we're not expecting perfection in terms of these lines. But it's a beautiful thing where the kiddos can come in here, put their lines, and have their attitude. I will say that as the evening progressed, things looked a little different on our chart. So we couldn't really tell which one was the favorite, except I do know that apple was a big one, and so were carrots right there. But we wanted kids to be graphing, thinking, talking about it, and what it looked like. So you think about, like, what might that look like for you if you're at a preschool or if you're at an elementary school? Could you do some kind of taste test where you're getting information? Because it was great for these kiddos to think about what that was, to get involved, to be hands-on, read the book, taste the fruit or vegetable, and make that mark on there. So think about what it might look like for you and how could you do this? And maybe it's not like this nice poster that you made, but you can just draw it out and look at it. All right. So then this one's like a really pretty chart that we made with the students who could do that. And we can use this again because it was laminated. But then we did some serious like, all right, in second grade, let's talk about tally marks and line graphs. And I had never done line graphs with students before. In all my years of education, I'd always kind of avoided line graphs, not sure what to do. So I contacted a friend of mine who teaches second grade, and I said, hey, Tiffany, let's do some line graphing together. Can I do something with your students? And she's got 16, 17 students in her classroom. She said, all right. So I said, all right, here's what I need you to do. I need you to gather some data. And I said, you choose. And I gave her some options. And one of them was to record if the students were shorts, pants, or a skirt or dress to school. And so she did this Wednesday through the following Wednesday. And I showed up on the last day that this chart was made. So she taught her students about tally marks. And I was able to come in with this data that was on her whiteboard and say, all right, students, they knew me because I'd been in her classroom helping her, demonstrating lessons, observing and giving feedback. So it's time to take this data and make a line graph out of it. So we gathered around and this, here's pictures of that line graph as we made it. We started with shorts and said, all right, let's talk about how many students wore shorts and what that looked like. So we made our XY graph with the axes, just like Stuart talked about in his book. And you can see that I labeled on the left that pants are going to be in blue. And we talked about putting dots above each of those days for where it lasts. And then I drew that line going across because I wanted them to be able to see what this looks like for our first piece. Then I said, okay, now it's time for them to get more hands-on. So I said, now we're going to graph how many students wore shorts. So we went back through similarly, looking at how many shorts were worn each day. With the students taking turns placing dots on there. And then another student came in and drew the line to connect that. And this is what it looked like. And I thought, I know what I'm doing. Let's do a notice and wonder. What do you notice? What do you wonder? They all noticed that it looked like a fish. That's really all that we cared about at this point. So as much as I was hoping for grandiose ideas of like, hey, look, they're inverse of each other as they go across, we talked about how it looks like a fish. And that was fine because that's what was on their mind. And then we talked a little bit about the up and down and the inverse and a little bit about the weather and what that looks like. And had a nice shorter conversation about that, but more talking about that fish. And then the third...
Great, John, to be able to even talk about that stuff, even though the fish is fun because that's what they saw as an image, but to even talk about trend lines and that sort of thing, even just to introduce that idea a little bit. Just think, the next time, the time after that, the time after that, when you're doing line graphs, what these kids are going to know.
Yeah, just to recognize that, right? Trending perfectly. I had them come up then. We did the dots for how many students wore a skirt or a dress. Talked about why that might be, what was the weather like, what were preferences. And then my next student came up and was able to draw that line going across. And then again, having a conversation about what do you notice, what do you wonder, what do you see on here? And we had our legend there on the left, letting people know what each of those colors meant and having a conversation about trends, just like Stuart said, and what that means. And then there are two things that get added to this at the end. So I'm going to move the slide along. But what do you notice here? There's two things that are different on this one. So the first thing is that the date is there. We did this on May 4th. But the other thing is on the right side. Do you see that we did what they were wearing on Thursday, that next day? So they did this as a classroom Wednesday to Wednesday. I showed up Thursday morning and we did one final, okay, how many students are wearing pants today? How many are wearing shorts? Who's wearing a skirt? And by the way, it's cold today. The weather had dropped a little bit. So that idea of trending, Stuart, spot on, because that's where they wanted to go and that's what they wanted to talk about. This was real. This is what they were doing. It was great, so I loved it. The last thing, I wasn't able to interview this teacher because I forgot, and then I moved on from that. But I asked her just a couple of things about what she thought, and here were her comments. So I'll give you just a moment to read those on your own. I'll point out the third one. They were excited to come in and talk about what they were wearing. They wanted to provide that data and let the teacher know and let the students know what they were wearing that day and what it was about. So really fun to have that piece.
Data in action, really great.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
So this was just kind of a summary of what we've been talking about. And well, before I do that, I want to say, John, that there are two things. One is that I'm really proud that I was the one who got you to dip into line graphs with young children, because I know you're going to take it to new heights. And then secondly, I just think that it's so fulfilling for me to see ideas that I present in book form come to life. That people actually do the stuff, and that teachers, that you in our audience can take these ideas and these materials and introduce the whole idea of data collection and representation to your students and have them create infographics. And it's just such a great extension of the work that I do, that I feel just very, very excited about it. So thank you for doing those projects, John.
Certainly.
Great. And so this is just kind of like a little visual summary of what we've been talking about all along here. That what is data that you collect? You collect data. What is it? It's stuff you have to take polls about or ask questions about, or think of a question that you want answered and then go after it, like a favorite meal, or like who's wearing what to school, or what colors are favorite colors, and then think about, okay, what's the best way to collect that data and get some information in front of you? How can you organize it so that it is meaningful and so that you can do something with it? And then what kind of graph is most appropriate? How can you create that graph? And then the idea that the kids start to move things around and do things and think for themselves about wondering what to think about is just gosh, I think I've used this word twice already. I'm going to use it again. It's just powerful. It's just absolutely powerful. And so that's really great. And then the add-on that I think is exciting is to then take it and make it an infographic so they can share that information with other people, and show others what their point is and how they were able to do it. And just think how proud, well, you heard a couple of them, how proud their parents will be and what they're able to do, and how proud we'll be when they get a little further along in school and move up into third, fourth, and fifth grade.
Yeah, making it attractive to people, right? That they're drawn in to want to look at that data more closely.
Exactly. Yeah, so as we come to the close of this presentation, I hope you all enjoyed it. We realized that we didn't leave time for questions right now, but there's some in the chat box, we noticed, and there's also some of you who will be thinking about questions afterwards. And John's email is right in the middle of this, and this will be up for a few minutes, so you can jot that down. And John will collect any questions that you have, and then he and I will be glad to field them and provide answers to you about anything that's really important about the presentation that we gave you today. But then we have a bonanza. We have a special announcement to make. We're going to try something different. Like, we wanted to extend the information in my book into real life situations. We want to extend this presentation into a project, into something that goes beyond our presentation, into your own real life. And so, as an attendee, as a participant, you're invited to create your own data collection project with your students, something that takes all we talked about today into practice and works with your student to do it and make an infographic out of it. And if you do that, if you would like to submit a project, go to this link. John created a link for you where you can submit your project. He's also willing to answer questions with you. And the first 50 respondents will receive a free copy of my book, Show and Tell. And we have to admit that we can't send out international copies So we can only send out books to people in the United States, but we also welcome international submissions and we'll thank you for them. We just don't have the capability of sending the books out to you in foreign countries. We selected a deadline of October 20th because we think it'd be great if you did this at the beginning of the school year, maybe a back to school project or maybe something you think about over the summer. But we would love to see samples of your work. We'd love to see what you're doing. And John and I really want to thank you for being a part of our presentation today.
Very much. Again, contact us for any questions, or if the link doesn't work, I can always send that to you. But we want to make this as interactive as possible moving forward. So thank you, Stuart, for all you've done.
Can't wait to see your projects. Thank you, John. Bye-bye.
Bye.